Hey everybody, it is Thursday, October 24th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Winunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, we continued the media literacy tour yesterday. Spoke to two big assemblies, 500 kids apiece, over at Scarsdale High School in Westchester County, New York, speaking to the next gen again about how to navigate fact from fiction, misinformation, disinformation, where to rely on your news, get factual information. So we are trying our best here at Mo News to not only inform you, the podcast listener, but potentially your kids. Actually, I heard from a few kids who came up to me afterwards who were like, my mom totally listens to your podcast. My dad loves your Instagram account. So glad to have fans up there.
I may know some of them, Moshe.
Well, we had, is that where our
yes, I sponsored
career shadowers? Yes.
I was the sponsor, or I guess I oversaw one of the high school projects of some graduating seniors last spring. They put together their own podcast. They came over to my house at one point and we kind of went over scripts and stuff. So yeah, we do have some fans out in Westchester.
We had a couple who came up to me afterwards who were like, I want to intern for you guys. I said, okay, apply online. And, we'll do our best as we're still transitioning offices here.
Did you get any good questions, though? Or did you get any insight into how they're getting news?
Yeah, it was funny, actually. Even they at their generation, like age 14 to 18, when I said, okay, how are you getting your news? Raise your hand if you get it from TikTok. And like half of them were like reluctantly half raising their hands. I'm like, guys, it's okay.
We know.
We know where you're getting your news. So that was item one, is like the stigma attached to getting your news on social media. Whether you're 45 or 15 appears to be pretty similar.
Okay, speaking of the news, let's get to it. Starting with a deadly E. coli outbreak linked to one of the most popular fast food chains in America. Why the CDC says it's only expected to grow. To politics, a warning from Donald Trump's former chief of staff about what he would expect from a second Trump term and why he says he would expect that Donald Trump will rule like a, quote, dictator, and what Trump said about Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, and then you got Kamala Harris chiming in, you got Don Trump Jr. responding, a lot of back and forth over all of this yesterday.
To the Middle East, Israel says it has killed Hezbollah's likely successor after assassinating Hassan Nasrallah just a few weeks ago. And it comes as the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is in the region. He's trying to broker some type of end to the war in Gaza. Back to the election, some warnings about a Chinese-controlled bot army and how it's trying to influence U.S. voters. And U.S. intelligence officials are warning that Russia and Iran might be trying to incite violence after the election. To business news, sales of existing homes in the U.S. are on track for their worst year in 3 decades. What is keeping people on the sidelines? And getting around like they do in the Jetsons could be closer than we think. Air taxis could be the new reality, the latest on rules that the government has just issued.
His boy, Elroy.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, some of those theme songs from childhood just stick with you all these years later.
Jane, his wife.
There you go. Jill, speaking of air travel, big moment in air travel history on this day in history. We'll take you back to the days of the Concorde.
Okay, let's start with an important health story. An E. coli outbreak linked to one of McDonald's most popular items, its Quarter Pounders, has sickened at least 49 people in 10 states, and that includes 1 death. 10 of those people have been so sick that they've had to be hospitalized. The CDC issued a food safety alert this week, warning that dozens of people reported eating the Quarter Pounder sandwich at McDonald's before they got sick. So at this point, it isn't exactly clear which ingredient in the Quarter Pounder is making people sick, but the USDA says it is likely the slivered onions or the beef patties. Most of the illnesses are in Colorado and Nebraska, but the CDC says this outbreak stretches a lot further than that. People have reportedly been sick in states like Utah, Oregon, Montana, Kansas, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. For now, while this investigation continues, McDonald's has removed the item from its menu in about 20% of its locations. It also stopped using the onions and the quarter-pound beef patties in several states. The FDA says the beef patties are only used for the quarter pounders and that the slivered onions are primarily used as well for the quarter pounder and not other items. At this point, diced onions and other types of beef patties used at McDonald's have not been implicated in the outbreak.
Yeah, word to the wise, get the chicken at McDonald's for now. In terms of impact here, 85% of the U.S. population eats at McDonald's at least once a year. Those are the stats kept by McDonald's. 85% of Americans who spend about $10 billion a year at McDonald's. So a lot of potential impact here, a lot of concern. The McDonald's president actually went on NBC's Today Show yesterday to try to assuage concerns, saying they have dealt with this and eating at McDonald's moving forward is safe. Here's a bit of what he said.
We are very confident that you can go to McDonald's and enjoy our classics. You know, we took swift action yesterday to remove the quarter pounder from our menu. This was swift and decisive action by us. And, you know, it is the quarter pounder and two ingredients on that quarter pounder that are under investigation by the CDC. So, you know, I want to say to our consumers that you can confidently go to McDonald's today.
So as we're getting that, the CDC is saying that they do expect the number of cases to grow. E. coli is a common bacteria, but certain types can make you sick. There's a whole bunch of potential symptoms here, including stomach cramps, fever, vomiting, diarrhea. Most people can recover without treatment, but others can develop serious illness here. The CDC says that if you've recently had a McDonald's quarter pounder and are experiencing these symptoms, call your doctor.
Okay, let's talk politics and some major warnings from former top military officials from the first Trump administration about Trump's goals if he were to be elected again. John Kelly, the former Marine general who was Trump's longest serving chief of staff and spent a lot of time behind closed doors with the former president, he agreed to 3 on-the-record recorded conversations with a reporter for the New York Times. He says he was deeply bothered by Trump's recent comments about potentially employing the military against his domestic opponents. So just for context, Kelly has been critical of Trump for quite a while, but these new comments and this interview with the New York Times has really taken it to a new level. He said that in his opinion, Trump met the definition of a fascist, that he would govern like a dictator if allowed, and that he had no understanding of the Constitution or the concept of rule of law. He talked about and also confirmed previous reports that Trump had made admiring statements about Adolf Hitler, that Trump had expressed contempt for disabled veterans and had characterized those who had died on the battlefields for the United States as, quote, losers and suckers. That was first reported by The Atlantic back in 2020. Here is a bit of Kelly's interview with the New York Times. This is where he is talking about Trump describing Adolf Hitler.
He commented more than once that, you know, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
A spokesperson for the Trump campaign called Kelly's accounts of his time in the White House, quote, debunked stories, and said that Kelly had beclowned himself.
Jill Combs, Don Trump Jr., was also asked about the comments. He called Kelly a swamp creature. They refer to people who've been in Washington for a while as part of the swamp, saying Kelly is more interested in a corporate board seat, and made reference to the fact that Kelly is doing this interview about 2 weeks before the election, though, again, as you noted, Kelly's long been critical of Trump here since they've had their breakup going back to 2019. So Kelly's words here pounced on by Democrats, including Kamala Harris, who spoke out about them yesterday. Here's a bit of what she had to say.
Yesterday, we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired 4-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas.
So we should note there that some of those words are, in fact, John Kelly. Some of those words are Kamala Harris's. The dictator comments, that's a reference to what Trump has been saying, which is, I will be dictator for a day on my first day of my second term to carry out my border plan. He says it's only for a day. Democrats have warned that rhetoric like that is dangerous, and they don't trust him when he says things like that. It led to a whole back and forth here, Jill, especially in light of the fact that Kelly is not by himself here. He's not alone in terms of former military leaders who worked in the first Trump administration who have issued warnings about him. You have former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the top military official under Trump, Mark Kelly, also a general. He spoke out about Trump in Bob Woodward's new book, saying that Trump is, quote, a fascist to the core. He is now the most dangerous person in the country. I had suspicions when I talked to you about his mental decline, but now I realize he's a total fascist. This, again, Mark Milley, who served as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the top military role from 2019 to 2023. On top of that, you have former Trump Defense Secretary, General James Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, someone who Trump praised previously, put in as Defense Secretary. They had a falling out. Mattis has said that he agrees with Milley and John Kelly, all these former generals, calling the remarks that Trump is the most dangerous person ever, saying he agrees with the remarks that Trump is, quote, the most dangerous person ever. Now, Trump has replied, as he does about a number of these officials that he fired or resigned during his first term. He has called General Mark Milley a stupid person. He has called General John Kelly one of the dumbest people he's ever met. A bully, but a weak bully, just stupid. General Mark Milley, he said, again, was a woke train wreck. And he says that, he oversaw the withdrawal from Afghanistan. That was embarrassing. That was a failure. So he doesn't take Milley seriously here. So a lot of back and forth. You also then had Mike Pence's former chief of staff, Nick Ayers. He was close to the situation, knew Kelly very well. In fact, when Kelly leaves the Trump administration, they asked Nick Ayers to take over as Trump chief of staff. He said no at the time. He has since now endorsed Trump for a second term. So he spoke out and said that the allegations from Kelly, who was chief of staff to Trump, while Ayers was chief of staff to Mike Pence, are patently false. So some back and forth here. You got the three generals who are critical, worried about Trump, how he would use the U.S. military, his views of the military, things he said that concern them. Then you have the people around Trump who say, he didn't, misuse the military during his time. So you guys are taking this out of whack here. But nonetheless, something that Kamala Harris is highlighting here, Jill, especially as we learn that she's making her closing argument to voters, right? We're almost just over a week now out from the election. We have learned via the Washington Post here that she is set to give her closing argument, the beginning of her closing arguments, in a speech on the National Mall on Tuesday. And according to permit applications, she will be speaking on the ellipse. Notable because she may be speaking on the same exact spot that Donald Trump spoke from on January 6, 2021, just before his supporters made their way to the Capitol then for that riot. So Harris clearly trying to draw a linkage there, trying to reinforce that. And so she may indeed on Tuesday give her speech to the country about why she should be elected president in just days' time from the spot where Donald Trump spoke on January 6th.
Time for the speed read from CNN. Hezbollah has confirmed the death of Hisham Safadine. He was the presumed successor of Hezbollah following the assassination of leader Hassan Nasrallah. The IDF says that Safadine was killed when the Israeli Air Force attacked the underground intelligence headquarters of Hezbollah in Beirut's southern suburbs about 3 weeks ago. Hezbollah said in a statement that Safadine was killed in an Israeli airstrike, but they did not specify the date. The group has yet to name a successor to Nasrallah. Moshe, we should also note Hamas at this point has not named an official successor yet after the killing of Yahya Sinwar.
Yeah, with Israel going after these guys one by one by one, it appears one of the more dangerous jobs right now is to be the new head of Hamas, the new head of Hezbollah, or even the new presumed successor. Safadine, we should note, was a cousin of Nasrallah. He also was close friends with Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC Iranian commander who Trump assassinated back in 2020. Safadine, by the way, was a terrorist, was designated a terrorist by the U.S. government and the Saudi government back in 2017 for the various things he was involved in. on behalf of Hezbollah. So really, the Israelis here are taking it to Hezbollah, taking it to the Iranians, taking it to Hamas here, taking out their entire leadership corps. We should note in that strike against Safedin, they took out the head of intelligence for Hezbollah, along with 25 other intelligence leaders for Hezbollah. And so that group trying to recover here, as much of their leadership has been knocked out over the last couple months. It comes as the Americans here are trying, again, Anthony Blinken, in his 11th trip to the region here, trying to use this as an opportunity to potentially lead to a ceasefire here, given the weakening nature of Hamas and Hezbollah. Blinken spoke with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman about efforts. In the last day, the State Department putting out an effort saying they're looking towards lasting regional stability, including greater integration here. Remember, one of the reasons Hamas first launched the October 7th attacks is because the Israelis and the Saudis were close to a deal here, a huge deal between the home of Islam and the Jewish state there that potentially would have opened a new era in the Middle East. And that's something that Hamas and Iran were not hoping for. They like the old era, one full of conflict. So they're trying to renew those talks right now. But the Saudis, among others, say the war in Gaza has to end before there's any deal here. So they're hoping on some diplomatic resolution. There still is a lot of back and forth between the U.S. and the Israelis. Again, the lesson in recent weeks reinforced to the Israelis is that by not listening to the U.S., they've been able to take out some of their top enemies. So some reluctance here probably on the part of Israel to strike any sort of deal, especially now that a week and a half before the election, given there is a potential for Donald Trump to be elected here, and he might have his own ideas as to what should happen in the region.
Well, speaking of the election, from Reuters, an army of Chinese-controlled social media bots is attempting to influence voters in Alabama, Florida, Texas, and Tennessee. This is according to some new research published on Wednesday by Microsoft. The operation represents a coordinated interference effort against down-ballot races, experts say, in which the fake accounts are denigrating a number of Republicans. Some names: Congressman Barry Moore of Alabama, Michael McCall of Texas, and Senators Marsha Blackburn and Marco Rubio. The troll network has parroted anti-Semitic messages, amplified accusations of corruption, and promoted opposition candidates, according to Microsoft. The group responsible has previously been associated with China's Ministry of Public Security, according to the researchers, and the lawmakers were each targeted because they had denounced Chinese government policies in the past. The report notes that the lawmakers were all targeted because they had denounced Chinese government policies in the past.
Yeah, this is something I reinforced to the kids at Scarsdale High School yesterday, and I'm reinforced to all of you. Be very careful as to what you're seeing on social media and who might be behind it in terms of taking messages and amplifying them, or creating messages like in this case. So in this case, the bots from China criticized more support for Israel, used anti-Semitic language. Another collective of related accounts claimed Rubio was part of a financial corruption scheme. They claimed that McCall was engaged in insider trading. So a whole variety of things to try to impact the race here. It did not appear that this has led to high levels of engagement, in the words of Microsoft here. They didn't provide any metrics on how many Americans actually viewed the social media posts, but the fact that they're even making this effort and some Americans saw them, concerning here.
From NBC News, U.S. intelligence officials are also warning that Russia and Iran may try to incite violence or disrupted protests in the U.S. after the election. An unclassified assessment released this week says the U.S. intelligence community is increasingly confident that Russian actors are considering, and in some cases implementing, a broad range of influence efforts timed with the election. Some of these are aimed at inciting violence and calling into question the validity of democracy as a political system, regardless of who wins. The document also says intelligence officials believe that Iran could similarly pave the way for violence through online influence operations.
Yeah, so we told you about this, right? So you got China in that last story. In this story, you got Russia and Iran. A lot of concern about how they're trying to influence Americans, trying to get us to question our system, question our government, question one another, our own neighbors. Back in 2020, the U.S. accused Iran of creating a website and social media campaign, posing as right-wing Americans, calling for various public figures tied to the election to be killed. So when you see extremist stuff, when you see potential threats here, they might be coming actually from foreigners pretending to be Americans here to get us to rip each other apart here. The assessment says Iran may try to incite violence like it did back in 2020. They've warned that the three U.S. adversaries, China, U.S., and Iran, are in a persistent propaganda campaign against Americans. aiming to divide us. As of right now, and we've told you this, Russia appears to be hoping for Trump to be elected. Iran, as a government, looks like it's hoping for Harris to be elected. China just wants to create chaos here. It does not appear that they prefer either Harris or Trump, at least officially, given that both of them have promised to be very tough on China.
Just chaos. Any chaos.
China wants chaos. Iran, elements of it wants Harris. Russia, elements of it wants Trump. That's what we know right now based on what they've been pushing.
Look, when you see so many people protesting with signs like "Down with the USA," in the
burning
United
American
States
flags.
and burning American flags, it's not hard to make the connection regarding what's behind it.
We had this conversation over the summer when we were at NATO. I spoke to John Kirby, the national security spokesperson. We did a whole session with him, and he said, listen, there is evidence here. We know what Iran's goal is. So infiltrating protests here in America to get us to hate each other more and divide ourselves more is something they love doing and are going to be trying to do more of.
To some business news now from the Wall Street Journal. Sales of existing homes in the U.S. are on track for the worst year since 1995 for the second year in a row. Persistent high home prices and elevated mortgage rates are keeping potential home buyers on the sidelines. Sales of previously owned homes in the first 9 months of the year were lower than the same period last year. This is according to data from the National Association of Realtors. Existing home sales in September fell 1% from the prior month to an annual rate of 3.84 million. That is the lowest monthly rate since October of 2010.
So there were high hopes for this year after a very sluggish 2023. But mortgage rates stayed higher throughout the year than some had forecast. That interest rate cut came later than some had expected. That has kept home buying affordability low. Home prices still rising. Inventory still below historic levels here. Home insurance costs. And there's, of course, the election. The uncertainty around that is leading some folks to not purchase right now. So just a whole bunch of factors there that have people sitting on the sidelines.
And finally, from CNN, the FAA has published some new rules that it calls, quote, the final piece of the puzzle toward allowing half helicopter, half airplane, electric air taxis to start whizzing through the skies. Earlier this week, the FAA published 880 pages of special regulations that spell out how pilots will learn the new subset of aircraft designs. It is part of a budding multi-billion-dollar industry being flooded with investment money in hopes of a future that closely mirrors the flying cars from the Jetsons.
Meet your Jetson. I just pulled up the lyrics, by the way. Jill, the entire theme song of the Jetsons is Meet George Jetson, his boy Elroy, daughter Judy, Jane, his wife. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. But yet it's so catchy.
What more do you need? They're just introducing.
Just name them all. There you go.
I guess they're leaving out their robot housekeeper. What was her name?
Rosie the robot.
That's right. I knew it. So the FAA administrator said at a convention in Vegas that this is introducing an entirely new category of aircraft that for the last 80 years we have had two types, rotor and fixed wing. And now we've got a third type.
You ready for those to be whizzing over your home sometime soon, folks? Known as electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, or EVTOLs, EVTOLs? Are they calling it? One of you in the aviation world, please message me and let me know how to pronounce that acronym correctly. The FAA now recognizes the designs as falling under its newly created powered lift category. It can fly like a plane, but take off and land like helicopters at traditional airports, as well as vertiports, they call them, in urban areas. So a whole new thing here. Joby Aviation of California showed off a full-size model of a 5-seat, 6-rotor design. It says it'll cruise at 200 miles per hour, put off a noise signature that is as quiet as a normal conversation. Joby hopes this aircraft will hit the market next year, but it has not yet been certified by the FAA to carry paying passengers. So Jill, a heads up for all of you about what may be flying over you sometime soon.
Look, traffic is a nightmare. So if this helps, I guess this is a good
thing. We'll take it. Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Nicely done there.
Well, Jill, Back to the Future claimed we would have it by 2015, back in 1985 when they made the movie. So we're just a decade behind Back to the Future's prediction. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1901. A 63-year-old school teacher named Annie Taylor became the first person to take a plunge over Niagara Falls in a barrel. On this day in 1901, she learned of the growing popularity of the Niagara Falls.
So, Moshe, what exactly is it that would possess someone to say, put me in a barrel and throw me over the side of Niagara Falls?
Well, I don't know Annie Taylor well, but I'm glad you asked. Because as the story goes, in July of 1901, just a few months before that, she read an article about the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. And she learned of the popularity of these enormous waterfalls located on the New York-Canada border. Strapped for cash, looking for fame, she said, I have the perfect stunt. I'm going to go over the falls in a barrel. She did get some speaking gigs afterwards because she survives, but she never really made that much money. So, Jill, it's pretty simple. She wanted to be famous. She wanted some money. She did inspire a number of copycat daredevils. Between 1901 and 1995, 15 people went over the falls mimicking that. 10 of them survived. We don't recommend here on the Mo News podcast.
I'm going to go with a hard pass on that.
Yeah, hard pass, 0 out of 10. Do not go over Niagara Falls in a barrel.
In a barrel. Oh, my God.
So, kudos to her. She's a 63-year-old woman in a barrel. She survived.
She's like, what do I have to lose? Let's do it.
I have to lose? I'm going to become famous. All right, on this day in history, in 1940, the 40-hour work week went into effect. Ford Motor Company actually adopted the 5-day, 40-hour work week back in 1926. Back then, we were doing 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Congress limited to the 40-hour work week. And now I feel like post-pandemic, Jill, we're back to the 60, 70, 80-hour work week. All right, in some aviation history, back in 2003, 21 years ago today, British Airways flew its last Concorde flight. The supersonic jet had also been flown by Air France, which had ended similar operations. It was developed back in the 70s. These were sleek, delta-winged planes that could make the trip from New York to London in 3.5 hours, traveling at more than 1,300 miles per hour, more than double what typical jets do. It was a symbol of speed, luxury, super pricey, but there was a tragic accident back in 2000 where a Concorde crashed on takeoff. All Concorde flights were grounded after that for over a year, and that would lead to the end of the Concorde. And we end here with a bit of music history. On this day, 53 years ago, Don McLean releases his second studio album, American Pie. On this day, famous lyrics there, Jill. I would discover my wife and my mother-in-law have all the verses memorized of American Pie, like deep cut, like several verses in, and they know every word. I was like, what possessed you two? And it's a thing. It's a thing for them. It's a lot of fun watching them sing it. But clearly.
I'm impressed because I know a lot of that song, but definitely not every word to every verse. So kudos, Alex and her mom.
Yeah, they go deep into like the 5th or 6th verse there.
It's a long song.
Jack be quick, Jack Flash sat on a candlestick. By the way, I don't know the lyrics. That was
Helter
me reading
Skelter in a summer
off a website. Yeah. In other music news, time. Ooh, that was rough. Hootie did a much better version.
I didn't know even where you were going with that.
29 years ago, Time by Hootie the Blowfish comes out. On this day, 24 years ago, Sorry Miss Jackson by Outkast is released. And on this day in 2006, a young teenage country singer named Taylor Swift would release her debut studio album on this day. Jill, 18 years of T Swift we mark on this day.
And going strong.
Yes, my social media feed is full again of people attending the Eras tour. Now that it's back, it looks like it hit South Florida over the weekend. First
rule of going to the Eras tour, post about it incessantly on Instagram.
Every song. We want clips of every song on Instagram stories.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It helps us grow. For real, it does. Please let them know about us. Follow us. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And give us a kind review in the App Store. We would really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.